Okay. So we're going to report back. Thank you for engaging in what you're I'm going to try to attempt to write a report. And so you were able to select whatever topic you wanted to talk about. If you didn't talk about one of these topics, we'll write it down anyway. So who's going to report back for your group? I don't know, Crystal is taking notes. But anyway, okay. Do you have any most pressing capital? What question did you address? We did number 3, identifying 2 or 3 top priorities. Okay, go ahead. Okay. One of the things we talked about was whether or not APSA, like some universities, could have toolkits, basically, for what APT committees could use to make sure that their processes are the level playing field, that people can identify biases in letters, just a whole host of things. And maybe drawing on what other universities have done, that APT committees in the department should have some training, before they, we assume that we all know what we're supposed to do, and the answer is we don't. But it would be nice if there was an APSA toolkit on tenure and these kinds of things. One of the things, a point that Robbie made, and this is something that would require some wordsmithing, but on letters, at R1s you expect to have letters from people who are R1. But what Robbie was saying was it's the scholar, not the institution. So that, and something like at Duke, if there's a letter from someone who's at a non-R1, well, you write up a statement as to, well, this person used to be at MIT, but then they realized they wanted to live on the coast, and so they're at or something, but this is the top person in this area, and so it's the person, not the institution and what they've done. So that the assumption is that you have to write up, who these people are and why you went to them, and it's not necessarily the institution. We talked about engaged scholarship and how institutions should think about what that means. First of all, it's not just writing an op-ed, but that when you're going to be engaged scholarship, it's based on research, right? And then we kind of went after the top 3. Not all the work that people do are going to fit in the top 3, right? Some of the top 3 are not going to be, amenable to that work. Maybe departments need to think about what are the top journals in the field that the candidate is working in. And instead of having the generic, you have to have articles in the top 3, that you're working in this area. And these are the top journals that people in your area consider to be the ones that your work should be appearing in. So if it's there, and it's not in JLP, well, that's fine. And I think we just have to stop making the assumption, and we talked about, that one that if it's in one of the top 3, it's good. Right. Because there's a lot of crap in those journals, and we know that, right? And some of it might be ours. Huh? But also on the other side, we need to make sure that junior scholars are not under the assumption that if they get an article in one of the top three, that somehow that means they're going to get it. Mm-hmm. Because there's more involved in looking at a person for a lifetime appointment than just whether or not you got an article in one of the top three. Because that might be the only thing you'll ever have. And so that's where we were. We had a great discussion.
Thank you. I just want to follow up to the suggestion about the department maybe shifting what the notion of the top three is and tailoring that notion to the scholars research. Mm-hmm. How can that be institutionalized? Does it be in writing? Does it have to be something you just nudge and tell your mentee? What ways can the department make that a reality so that it's clear and communicated in a transparent way? Coming from Church Mason, that is a hard one now, but we don't have those type of standards. I think it is the conversation that happens in the room with the colleagues saying, you know, this person works on this, so therefore, so it's kind of an information campaign, advocate kind of role of those who are within the field and say, you know, she works on federalism, this is the top journal on federalism. So having those type of conversations, and we know bargaining models, right? So that really influences the outcome. Yeah, so continue from a tradition, but there's a door project. I'm not saying one of those not door, but it's a science project that says we can publish our own publishing. It's an average impact factor. Across that average, there's huge variation. The goal is to find if someone is going from associate to full when they've established a profile, so difficult to junior level. But the notion is we're evaluating the person and not the job. Right. Right? So we're looking at what that person has done. And so your project in science is being to just push off any reference to impact factors in journals. Rather talk about the person, what they've accomplished, presence in their work and so on. Now, I don't know if you generate enough for the person if they're coming up to tenure to have that strong individual profile to still falling back on the averages, which, you know, more than like some of these articles in these documents never get cited.
Exactly.
So I read something, okay, you made it, but who cares? Right? So anyway, so it doesn't make someone look at your project, it may look better science, but it is a major push to get away from this impact factor. All tenure and promotion committees would have a chair. And I think it would be the chair's responsibility to look at the journals that the person coming up for tenure to know something about. Because even if you're in a subfield, American politics, there are so many different journals where Americanists can publish. That would be a directive that could be put into the department should be responsible for doing this, or in the T&T file. Candidates should be telling us explicitly about the journal. I don't think that's what we communicated as a candidate.
Yeah, so along those lines, we have a plan of organization in our department that has APT in it, that describes explicitly what the steps are functionally, also kind of what the expectations are for excellence. But that historically has had an appendix with included journals. I don't actually like that because I think for whatever's excellent is excellent. Right. But at least the candidates have something that they can look at and start a conversation with leadership.
I think part of this might be on external evaluators too, in terms of helping to have experts contextualizing in the letter journals, both to help the department out, but also the letters are going to travel on through the process, and helping the people in English understand what a good international relations is. Part of that, now having to write these letters, you don't get any instruction on what they look like, and you can't see any models. because they're confidential. And so something that APSA could do that I think would be really useful is like an article in PS or some kind of like best practices for using an external evaluator. You know, what's an outline of a good external evaluation letter look like? Something that lots of people know a lot about, but
Even anonymized.
Just make one quick point, just kind of following up on Michael's point, and some of these others. I think it's like from a broader perspective, I think it's discourse and norms have to change. And, you know, I think comparative politics and IR, we were talking about a little bit about, are a little better on this. They have more, I think they're not as locked into the so-called big three as American politics is.
Right.
Because I know in IR, you know, although we did talk about IO. You know, ISU, JCR, you know, there's, in addition to those others, comparative and CCS, world politics. So, yeah, I think it's a norm thing, and kind of like what Michael was saying, like, it has to be a slow moving train, I think, to try and break those norms, because I think a lot of Americans are locked into Americans. But hopefully, you know, I don't know. That's not a real clear recommendation.
But it's a clear example, for instance, on the Census Bureau, when they have the race questions, we sometimes use examples. And every time they use specific examples, the number of responses to those examples increase. And so highlighting journals in the kind of cues people saying, oh, that's what they're looking for. And therefore that becomes a normative part of just evaluating what's been published.
Sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but another thing we do is if we have candidates that have a very diverse kind of research profile, we'll write an MOU with them, describing what they see as the most excellent outlets in their area of research. That MOU is then shared forward through the tenure process, so that everyone can coordinate on it.
That's cool.
Can I just see things on that? So the letter right issue connects to the top three issue in terms of, again, disaggregating excellence from institutions. So to say, you know, like if, for example, the department did what you said, and they've got a set of journals which are the appropriate journals for this work, and make the best out of this work. But then there's another level where the expectation is, well, now we'll go and we'll write to all the R1 institutions and get a set of letters from the R1s who won't, you know, chances are a lot of them writers are not going to give any credit to these journals. Then it's going to unravel the whole thing. So the thing about disaggregating excellence from institutions and fora is really, I think, really important, which is not to say that it's just an empirical question. Is this good or not? You can't determine that from the basis that it's at X university or an X journal.
Okay, thank you. That was great. Group number 2 is the citation group. Who's reporting? I think I am doing it. Okay. Which question is here?
I don't really enjoy looking at it. Yeah, representation, but all those questions are there.
2 or 3.
What would you like to share that? So I think what the person wanted to say is, trying to move away from just talking about citations to thinking about the impact of one's work. Right, so get away from the numbers game and talk about the satisfaction that comes from people reading your work, from it having some resonance with an audience, and we'll get back later to even entering the public domain to speak about that work. So we will largely focus, I think, on sort of workshops, helping early career and graduate students and scholars understand this process and think about it. So we were thinking about APSA. We know that there are some professional development workshops, but we were thinking about perhaps hooking up with sections, novel sections who do this, but bringing in authors of, editors of the relevant journal to that subfield, and holding a session at APSA that will help these scholars understand how the process works. And get these journalists to talk also about things like what kind of work gets picked up And again, I'd rather use that term than just like numbers. So what kind of work has been influenced from their perspective? And again, this is helpful because it's talking about the subfield journal potentially, which is we all agree can have incredible effect on the field because you've got the right people reading it. Like if you publish in a journal that no one cares about that kind of work, they're not going to have influence it. So we're sort of trying to bring people together, editors and early career scholars, in a session to help them understand the publication process, how they can think about their work in ways that will help them understand how it does get picked up. The sort of being the first idea sometimes, like you're supposed to do it, that often you want citation, but it also means you're a pioneer. Like I hate the gaming part of this. I don't like it. I like to think we're really helping people understand how to do work and how to think about problems. And I think we all want to be like influential, right? I mean, if you're going to feel that you're thinking about it, you like to think that it has some influence on somebody. So having something like that. We also talked about, the second part of that was also talking about how to have some public impact for your work. So helping maybe graduate students of the career scholars to communicate their research in ways that are effective and some places may have, we have a communicative science center at Stony Brook where scientists taught how to communicate with media, or something like that could also be very helpful. And again, we're thinking it's a package, right? If you are out there in the public domain, it has some synergistic effect with your work. Talking about maybe what you want to do is write a monkey cage tree. So these are workshops. And, I'm sure no one sections will jump on this, but if we can somehow figure out how to stimulate interest and holding such events, it would be really good. So we have a broad range of it, but the other thing we were talking about too was having a session with journal editors and publishing. Cambridge is your publisher, but after journals, I don't know if you hold strategy sessions, but so you have an annual strategy session with the journal editors. So you can also bring in these issues of, I don't know if they come up in those sessions, about Brexit citation to the articles that are coming in and how to. So you're already doing that. Is that already happening with the journal editors? You're thinking about those things?
Meaning like issues around citations?
We're talking about, John was mentioning in the IR field that will encourage the editors, will encourage people to think about broad citations, which includes a greater number of women, scholars of color, and so on. So have that a major consideration with Cambridge leading the charge, sort of talking about that, because I think from the publisher's perspective, this is all good, right? They're trying to increase the breadth and scope of readership, so they have an incentive in trying to make sure that these articles have good broad spectrum reach. So, I mean, do you look those in Washington? I mean, I know sometimes it can be nice, the publishers, if they have money, can bring the editors in, and, it can be a valuable session, session.
Right. I mean, Cambridge has sessions with the editors and editorial boards.
I'm not talking about that.
Yeah, and then we have APSA staff have strategy sessions with Cambridge as well, like an all-day strategy session.
But I'm thinking bringing the journal editors into that strategy session, right? Because what Cambridge can do is provide statistics on what articles got picked up that year, so that the editors are aware of what the metrics look like, who's submitting, presumably Cambridge can help keep track of these things, or the journal editors keep track of them.
We have Cambridge is keeping track of that, and then we also have data on that too. Yeah.
But I think that having the journal, not the editorial board thing is another thing. That's another kind of session. But having the publishers, the editors, seems to be having been through that very valuable.
Right. Okay. Agreed.
And also it helps with open access. It's such a moving, changing, crazy landscape.
It is absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, this is something that if the editors are educated on this, which I don't think editors are, right? Most editors don't understand what's happening to the publishing world in terms of income.
That's right.
But, once they understand that if they're brought into a workshop at a session level, that you're trying to help educate people, like, oh, I don't know how it works, you know, but increasingly we're gonna have to worry about how it works.
Definitely.
Because someone's gonna have to pay for it.
That's right. And the publishers haven't figured out how to pay for it.
Well, we know that some of them, I know they have some, Wiley, you know, I haven't figured out, but they have arrangements with some library consortia, where they'll cover so many authors to publish open access for free, right? This is that's the European deal.
Right. Right, but that's not it's not a financial model that will work long-term for the publishers, because there'll still be a lot of authors left out, and the new transformative agreements don't replace the subscription revenue that they're losing, you know, and so it's a very complicated.
But I think it's relevant to publishing, citations, all of these things. I mean, all of this is things that are going to have to learn more about business that they're in. Yeah. Sure. They're basically giving their work up, they have been giving it up for free, now they have to pay to give their work up, and they're going to make money out of it. It is crazy. So I think that's one.
That was one more, though. We talked about workshop strategy, this is a part of enhancing one citation visibility. But workshops in educating scholars how to maximize their visibility, exposure to enhancing their citations. It is, sign up for Google Scholar page, how to promote your work either in the public domain. That is, there's strategies to self-citations. I mean, there's something that some people do know about, but it's not uniformly disseminated across their either graduate training or career. So, what individuals can do in this domain to enhance their visibility and potentially their citation.
Yeah, one of these with the journal letters, they can be separate and alone, and we want to get away from self-promotion. Self-promotion is making sure your work has impact, right? I mean, it is self-promotion, but how is your work out, right? If you can find it, it's helping people find good work. You know, it's not just self-promotion has an aggressive ring to it. We need to get away from that because it's not the possible way to do it. You're still doing it. How is your work going to get noticed? Visibility.
Thank you. Three climate. Okay, so our discussion kind of mirrors many of the topics that we've been discussing so far, but I think one of the issues that I think also came out last week at the Georgetown meeting is how is it that we can support our colleagues and also us when it comes to retooling many of the things that we know and we need to relearn, right? So, for example, how is it that APSA can serve as a space to perhaps provide workshops on how to diversify your syllabi, how to decolonize your syllabi, how can you do that for introduction to American politics? What are the reading lists that are there that are just a set of resources to do that? I've been to, at my institution, we've been doing that, and I have to say that the people who provide those type of workshops, they don't have the training to do it, and I'm very terrible with it, and then you have these spillover effects because people don't want to go to that anymore, right? So having trained people who can do that effectively, besides personality and charm, I think that's important. And then the other discussion that we had is the need to have systematic data. So, for example, we were having a discussion about the survey from 2017, whether it can be repeated, to have more information about harassment, the profile of police design, so forth. So those were the main discussions. Yeah.
One that from members that are doing on sexual harassment.
Yeah, that's right. So please remind me that there is a group of scholars, forgive me, but I've forgotten their name. but they're partnering with APSA, and they're working on another survey that's kind of a follow-up to the 2017.
To the Shapiro and Campbell. To Shapiro and Campbell.
Right, it offered,
I don't know where they are.
Oh,
As members, or even former members, you
Yes.
can receive a survey that says, we want to survey your experiences on XYZ. So that's relevant to this particular point. So,
yeah, this is Hunt and colleagues at Alabama. Thank you so much for summarizing our discussion. I would just add in that we also brought forward the notion that APSA could serve as a clearinghouse for these kinds of trainings, for example, that might diversify curricula and could host some of the best sources of training, downloadable resources at the APSA website. I'm aware of University of Michigan's advanced program that is a treasure trove of resources, including for diversifying curriculum and training E&T committees. And then the University of New Hampshire has a really good theater program, interestingly, that teaches participants how to diversify syllabi. And through these illustrations in the theater program, you understand, oh yeah, that really is important to decolonize my syllabus. And one additional thing, APSA stating very strongly and joining in with other professional associations its stance on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion really carries weight for home institutions. We can point to a mandate from APSA and other social science associations and a form of legitimizing the efforts of the home institution, and this can help overcome resistance that naturally occurs. APSA's voice can be amplified as it coordinates with other special assistants.
You have a certification on the syllabi, is that like a syllabus bank that is more diverse, more inclusive in that sense? Because I know REP has capital syllabi on their website. I know the Migration Citizenship has that. So we don't know, syllabi bank, or I'm not quite sure.
I think that, but also I think what Marilyn was mentioning is that how do you decolonize your syllabi? What does it mean? Many of my colleagues don't have an idea of what does it mean to decolonize. Just starting from that basic level, I think it's needed. Excellent. Group 4.
Okay.
The last three grad students.
Yes. So we've
Did you answer or
we were mostly doing recommendations because we were like, we know what the problems are. So one of the things we've offered is at University of Maryland, there's a Rising Scholars Conference, which helps students present, but also check out the University of Maryland. And it's increased applications, I think it's at 37%, right, from minoritized communities. There's also the waiving of application fees and student fees that hit international students particularly hard. The other that Diana suggested was making a common sense list for departments of small steps they can implement to facilitate more inclusion. You know, we talked about the reimbursement thing. Michael talked about, well, that's difficult in Pennsylvania, but we could think about things we could do around fees, perhaps even doing startup funds or scholarships or something like that for graduate students, because I had never thought about the fact that they have the same moving expenses that faculty have when they're coming to a new place, yet get nothing in return. Abandoned GREs in some cases, or making a firm no on GREs if that's what in fact we want to do, because optional might confuse students. Having students include a resume, because there might not be a real attention to the things that make them particularly strong applicants on their statement of purpose, which all of us don't get trained in how to write. Interviewing students is another good way of maybe testing out this fit kind of issue. Lester brought up this really interesting kind of process that Michigan has, where Michigan alumni mentor current Michigan students. That could be really interesting. And to dovetail with what they're doing at Penn State is maybe having those same mentors from a non-academic, who work in a non-academic setting but are still very much within the discipline, acting as mentors for students as they're thinking about or considering non-academic jobs, but are very much still engaged in political science. And then another was having a way to evaluate grad students in an annual fashion. And there are a few ways to do that, but giving students some sort of written evaluation so that they can understand sort of where they are and how they're doing, so that no one is kind of caught flat-footed. And then another thought was to also provide or figure out a fund for helping students as they try to navigate life post-graduation. So maybe helping to help them with professional clothing or attire that they might need for professional presentations or other kinds of things. And then expanding notions of what professional development means. So that could be some of the things we've been talking about today about sort of editorial responsibility, citations, and how to be more responsible there, but also thinking about the market in more expansive fashion, talking about what do we want to say, increasing visibility, which is now part of what we all have to do. Like, I didn't know that you should have a website, for example, right? Those kinds of things that might go under professional development that we might not normally think of, but are now more part of the gig, as it were. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add, but that's just what it is.
Yeah, I don't have one thing. What we've been doing at Hopkins in general is trying to be involved in that integration project that I talked about earlier. So what we've tried to do, working on the assumption that some segment of graduate students are perform suboptimally because they don't see themselves as a discipline, is they worked with us to help integrate race into the discipline. I mentioned this. So Johns Hopkins is the first political science department in the world. So the racial history that Paula talked about is actually our fault. So what we do is we've acknowledged that and not only changed the way we admit graduate students reflect that, but we've changed the way we teach the discipline, and we've been having the graduate students work with us to basically
what they've been leading, so they've been doing all this research on the history of the political science department, what things are coming up. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to know.
And also, you all do a more holistic admissions process too.
Yeah. So the professionalization part is bringing those again. It's professionalization, yeah, but we have to remake the discipline. And this is us. It's not, we can't wait for the next generation to do it. We can't wait for some exogenous force or the exogenous force of the crisis. Yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Oh, and also Diana had talked about having a list of pipeline programs, right? So we can capture all these different projects that are happening all over that we might be unaware of, that we can help push our students toward.
One question for the Johns Hopkins. So what happens once you work with the grad students, they complete their research? How does the integration process work where you fold that back into the curriculum or into what you do in the department?
But they So right now, this might change, right? But right now, what they've been doing is they've been retrieving this issue of the department and connecting it to the broader trends in discipline. They've been presenting that. They've been running it, basically, but they've been presenting it to faculty as well. They're writing kind of reports. And what we're hopefully going to do is part of that, to write an article with them. So it's folding it all into the process.
And then fold that back into the discipline, fold that back into how we teach both graduate students and undergrads.
Yeah, and then they teach undergrads as well. So in many ways, what we found, it's our own peculiar ecology, but what we found is that if you empower the grads to do a lot of this stuff, they're an incredible force for doing it, because even the ones who aren't even studying like R&D, they're all really interested in it anyway, in this collective group. And they don't have, some of the faculty might be interested but not really at the time or not really care. Maybe it's not in a bad way, but you know what it's like. So there's no resistance to the rest. And they'll go and they'll do it, and if some faculty turn up, faculty don't turn up, they'll still carry on doing it. So and they're that kind of cement between the research profile of the department, the training, and the undergrad teaching as well, in many ways.
And Hopkins it's not like we have a lot of graduate students. So similarly, it's not like we have a lot of Black and brown students. So it's really, it's a graduate student project that's actually, the Black and brown students are involved. There's mostly white graduate students. Again, many of whom aren't what we consider REP scholars.
So before we close out, I want to say thank you for that. We're going to take an old-fashioned photo of this. Transcribe it, make sure you all receive it, and then for the ones that are for APSA, we'll have discussions about that internally and share with our staff committee, the organized sections, the APSA council as well. I'm sure will be very interested to hear about the work that we've done here as well. Paula?
So I was going to add one caveat, not caveat, but it is a caveat to the no GRE. No GRE does not equal equity.
No, it doesn't.
Right? It how faculty evaluate the file. And there's so many things that they can revert to that also have the same biases as the GRE, like GPA.
For sure.
Private institutions are high inflators. Duke is a high inflator, right? When you have the average of everybody graduating, it's about an A-, right? There's no differentiation. Public schools have inflated less, right? And HBCUs really not at all, So that a B is a B and a D is a D, right? But if you revert to GPA without understanding those same biases, you're just exchanging one for another.
Yeah, we were more concerned about the cost associated, not necessarily that the GRE was predictive of anything or would eliminate bias, but that cost on top of all the other things. And it's not predictive of anything.
Before we go, I just want to also thank you so much. Also mention that APSA is currently engaging in its strategic planning process for the 2022 through 2026.
2024 through 26.
24 to 26. Thank you. Grab here. And so all of this information, your contributions, the research, the findings, the recommendations from the task force, the strategy will be taken into consideration as we undergo that particular process in terms of how we move forward in a strategic way. So I want to thank you for that. One last thing, if anyone is investing a summer program this year for undergrads, for grads, please raise your hand. Get 5 seconds to name titles and give the name of the program, and then we can connect you all about that. So we'll start on this side. Georgetown Department of Government is running a thing called the Political Science Pre-Doctoral Summer Institute, which we did the application process. We already had the 20-ish students who are coming from the 5 states around here and the loop of a week-long boot camp on what is political science, how does the discipline work, how is it divided, what are the methods, what are the different career tracks that you can take, how do you prepare an application, how do you think about being a political scientist. The idea is to bring a good number of underrepresented students or underrepresented backgrounds to help them to imagine themselves in this discipline as well.
Lester?
We have the John Hopkins and name stocks in the Department of doing summer school for racial politics. First week of June is for graduate students from around the country. Like teach them to think about racial politics in more of an integrated fashion.
Ours just are all close to where, do we have a class yet?
Yes, we do have a class, they're all accepted, and they'll be coming your way. Soon.
Why do you guys have to share to write letters for those applicants? So that they're in, they're in political science? My cat was mad.
Mary? I already said, as mobilization and political economy, 8 weeks has been, we already have the first class for next year. Excellent.
Okay. And I know there is a program at Howard that's a pre-doctoral.
Yeah, Dr. Kanisha Grant in political science is running that pre-doc. It's not specific to political science.
Yeah.
It's getting like undergrad to go to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Wow, let's give us all a hand.